All right, so we're here. So for those of you who weren't here for the debate yesterday, what we're going to do, the structure, we're going to be, we're going to get right into it. So we're going to have a long-term security budget debate, and we will take a vote. So, we're going to take a vote at the start by show of hands and a vote at the end. That's how we will determine the winner, and I'll just, eyeball it with my, vision. And we are going to have opening statements on each side, rebuttals, a gentlemanly back and forth, a closing statement, and then we're going to take the final vote. So I hope you've got an initial impression here in terms of Bitcoin and long-term security budget. Let's have you, if you can put your hand up. Sorry, just our monitors are going off. Anyway, 1 second. So if you have an issue, if you believe Bitcoin will have some kind of issue in the longer term, based on the security budget, please raise your hand now. Hands up. Who believes there will be some kind of security budget issue? Okay. So I'm going to eyeball that at maybe 5%. What do you guys think? 5% is fair? About 5%.
Say 0.
So now, hands up if you believe there is not a long-term security budget debate. Hands up. All right. I'm eyeballing that at about 85%, I'm going to say. So I guess I'm going to guess about 10% of you abstain. So we'll go with that as our starting. So 85% on the it's not a big issue and 5% on the it's going to be an issue. So as Peter is the one who's going to take this side of the debate, so Peter, you can make your opening statement now. Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm glad I'm starting off with the odds stacked against me. It means I can only go up, or at least down by 5%. And so, as someone working on Bitcoin, I always kind of find it funny looking at the academic community who often go talk about Bitcoin in terms of trusted miners, trusted peers, honest, entities, and so on. Whereas I think the way to look at Bitcoin is you got to look at incentives. You got to go look at how would someone who is economically rational do something. And of course, looking through that lens, well, why do miners do what they do? Well, right now, they do what they do because of the subsidy and because of transaction fees. They go keep Bitcoin secure, commit transactions because of that revenue coming in. And, I may be wearing an ocean hat, but I'm a little skeptical of their view of miners being sort of this benevolent entity. My view is very much they're profit-driven. And, when you go outside here, walk around the booths, there's plenty of very expensive booths from very big mining entities. And that's the kind of profit that matters. So then the second thing is, well, let's look at the long term. Because obviously right now, Bitcoin seems to work just fine. I'm not concerned that much about Bitcoin right now. I think there are concerns around centralization, but that's not the same thing as security budget. This is a separate topic. So long term, first of all, as subsidy goes down, something has to go pay for security. Because we do have the 51% stack problem. Certainly, someone with enough money could say, you know what, I think Bitcoin should exist. Let's screw this over. Now, if your model is sort of the honest, benevolent model, where you assume people are willing to go spend money even though it's not economically rational, you might go look at it and say, hey, Bitcoin's fine. If someone tries to attack it, we'll defend somehow. Now, if you go to memepool.space, you could always ask the question, well, does it really look like miners are defending Bitcoin? Lots of people think JPEGs are bad, yet there's plenty of those in the chain. Now, if you think miners are profit maximizing, it's a different discussion. So certainly we have to somehow pay for security in the future. The usual dogma is transaction fees will go do this. But then the second issue we have is that transactions don't come consistently, and blocks don't come consistently. And what that means is that transaction fees tend to be very spiky. As blocks are not found for a while, transaction fees go up a lot. As weird events happen, transaction fees go up a lot. Well, let's look at it from an incentives point of view. If I'm a miner and I have a lot of hashing power and I see a block that someone else has found, is it in my incentive to create a new block, or is it in my incentive to steal all their fees, mine a block of my own, taking those fees, and then mine another block. And unfortunately, the math says that's actually what earns you the most money. Currently, in theory, this can happen if you have a block with exceptionally high fees, but fortunately, this doesn't happen very often, so we've never actually seen it happen. But we do not want to be in a world where miners frequently reorganize the chain just to take more money, because let's look at it from the other perspective. What if you are, say, Ocean Pool? You have like half a percentage of hash power. Can you make money by mining 2 blocks in a row? No, you can't. Your half a percentage of hash power just isn't enough to do this kind of thing. Now you're at a disadvantage relative to other miners who are playing these games, screwing over confirmations for us, and that inevitably centralizes Bitcoin. And we fought the block size debate about this. We want mining to be a level playing field where everyone, even you with your bitaxes, can earn money in proportion to your hash power. We need to fix this. Now, there's different technical solutions around there, but I would say the main fix is basically finding a way to make sure that miners are always paid. Extending the time at which miners are miners get a block reward is one. Breaking the 21-minute limit. There's also more clever things like soft forks to go and do attacks on basically holding Bitcoin to go create a pool of revenue that miners always get from. But I think the main thing I'm trying to go convince you here is that yes, this is an issue. And what I would ask you to is actually do the math. Don't just hand wave this. Sit down, look at the incentives. Don't assume people are going to play nice. Assume people are going to try to earn money. And with that...
Okay, thank you, Peter. All right, so Jimmy, let's hear your opening argument.
Sure. All right, well, thank you to BTC Prague, the organizers, Stephan, and all of you here for participating in this debate, or at least giving us an audience while we debate. The topic at hand today is the security budget and what the Bitcoin subsidy should be in the future. Whether the subsidy and fees are sufficient for Bitcoin. That's really the topic at hand. As you're aware, the subsidy halves every 4 years, and I believe it is Peter's contention that there will come a point in time when the subsidy will be insufficient to reward the miners and will thus make the Bitcoin network insecure. In other words, he thinks that in this debate, that the halving schedule is somewhat flawed and requires fixing so that the network can be secure. I hope I've steel-manned that argument to some degree. The network security, of course, is very important, and I have no doubt about that. But what is the argument about, really? Because the argument is really not, as you might think, it's not a technical argument, but an economic one. What is the optimal emission schedule? That's what we're asking, and that inherently assumes that there's some optimum amount of coins that need to come into existence, and that there's some justification for diluting the current holders of Bitcoin. And these, honestly, are straight out of some bad economic theories that we've been under for the past century. Money does not need central management, and dilution undermines the property rights of Bitcoin holders, violating the promise of a fixed supply. Now, you might not get diluted as much, depending on a certain amount of coins getting lost or burned or somewhat. But that's like saying that taxes aren't theft because everyone else also gets taxed. But leaving aside the moral issue of theft, especially given that people bought Bitcoin with the specific expectation that the limit would be 21 million, let's look at the technical reality. Peter believes that there are technical and reorganization risks, so it may be worth asking what exactly are the risks, and more importantly, what are the assumptions behind those risks. The main assumption here is that fee markets won't develop, that off in some future where Bitcoin doesn't double in price every 4 years, the fees specifically won't go up enough to compensate the miners, and that there is enough resources and reward for an attacker to mess with the chain, say with a large reorg. Let's take that all these assumptions in turn. First, in the first 4 halvings we've had, the price has more than doubled each time to compensate, and this hasn't been a problem. And predicting when the price growth or a fee market might falter is speculative and invites endless debate, undermining Bitcoin stability. Is it 4 halvings from now, 8 halvings from now, 15 halvings from now? No one really knows. So from a practical standpoint, even if we agreed on the security budget requiring more tail emission or something like that, when to start would be a giant contentious debate subject to endless argument. Second, the fee markets have developed in the past, at least for short periods of time, most notably in 2017, 2021, and 2024, when the fees exceeded the mining reward, and sometimes for fairly long periods of time. There's no reason to believe that they won't continue to develop, especially as you get halving in the subsidy and so on. So if fees are consistently greater than the mining reward, I think this debate is completely moot, because you have fees that are compensating the miners, and you don't need to subsidize them anymore because they're already getting enough through fees. Second, third, block rewards are taxed by miners on the Bitcoin blockchain are fairly rare and impractical. It is true that in some theoretical future where Bitcoin price stays very steady for 4 years and fee markets fail to develop, that there might be a profitable strategy for a miner to reorg, either through double spending or fee sniping or something else. But let's think about this for a minute. This requires a miner to have a significant amount of total network hashing power, significant amounts of energy, and for pools to stay in the state that they are now, where individual hashers are given block templates instead of making them themselves through something like Datum or Stratum v2. So all that is to say that there are assumptions on top of assumptions here, and miners, I don't think, would be willing to bear the social cost of doing all of this. Peter's looking at it from a very homo economicus angle, where, okay, you do the math, and it's rational for them to do it because they'll make like 50 cents more profit or however much it is. But there's a social cost to be paid when you do that, and when there's an obvious attack on the network. So the number of assumptions that you have to stack for this attack to come to fruition are many and unwarranted in a variety of ways. Finally, tail emission is completely impractical to implement because to many people, 21 million is sacred, and changing it risks a divisive hard fork that will fracture the community. And even if it doesn't, a tail emission change would signal a potential for changing Bitcoin again, which would make Bitcoin lose its credibility as a scarce long-term asset. Ultimately, Peter's argument comes down to thinking that you can control what you don't understand. None of us know the future, and acting now on simplified bad future assumptions is the height of hubris. To quote Friedrich Hayek, the curious task of economics is to demonstrate to men how little they really know about what they imagine they can design. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. Knut, take your 5-minute opening statement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, it's an honor to sit here side by side with giants. Fantastic to be here. Good morning, ladies and gentle plebs. We're gathered here to discuss whether the very thing that makes Bitcoin incorruptible, the thing that makes Bitcoin Bitcoin, its absolute unchangeable monetary policy, should now be sacrificed on the altar of short-term miner incentives. The proposal, it's, as you said, Peter, is tail emissions or a tax. So inflation or taxes. Will these two things be good for Bitcoin? In my opinion, these are the very two things that Bitcoin solves, the two problems that Bitcoin solves. Let's not mince words. Reintroducing inflation to secure Bitcoin isn't just economically illiterate, it's morally bankrupt. This is not a technical adjustment, it's a betrayal, a regression to some fiat rot that Bitcoin was designed to escape. Peter Todd, whose contributions to Bitcoin I deeply respect, of course, as should everyone in here, now offers what amounts to a Trojan horse for the central planner's mindset. If we're worried about miners leaving, then what the proposal is print more money or tax Bitcoiners? Well, does that sound familiar? That's the logic of every central bank and every central planner in history. The same logic that led us to Clown World, zombie companies, metastasizing governments, and incentives so warped they might as well be upside down. The core mistake lies here. Bitcoin is for the users, not for the miners. It's the users who set the rules. It's the users who validate. It's the users who refuse to run the software that violates the 21 million cap. Miners are service providers, not monarchs. They are and should be rewarded for following the rules, not rewriting them. This is not negotiable. The 21 million supply cap isn't just a number, it's the backbone of the entire system. Remove it and you turn Bitcoin from an incorruptible money machine into just another consensus by persuasion protocol, like fiat currencies or shitcoins. At the end of the day, Bitcoin is just an agreement on a fixed set of rules. And the very reason that we Bitcoiners agree on this set of rules is because of the unchangeable nature of Bitcoin's core functions. It's more expensive to try to break the rules than to just follow them. That's why we agree on this set of rules. That's why the 21 million happens. The fact is that an overwhelming consensus would be needed in order to change any of the fundamentals, is what makes people adopt Bitcoin in the first place. That is the contract and the reason that Bitcoin is orders of magnitude more successful than any self-proclaimed alternative. If there's anything the general public knows about Bitcoin, it's the fact that there can never be more than 21 million Bitcoins. This is the first thing people learn. And let's talk about the price. If historical patterns persist, well, we shouldn't assume anything here because it's about economics, but Bitcoin is likely to double in purchasing power before ever halving if historical patterns persist. More than offsetting any theoretical decline in block rewards. Fees denominated in Satoshis become more valuable over time, not less. There is no security crisis. There is only a misunderstanding of the exponential nature of purchasing power, the purchasing power of a money with a fixed supply. Everyone underestimates Bitcoin. And with rising global demand for uncensorable transaction, the value of block space will increase and not shrink. The fact is, if all 8 billion of us adopted Bitcoin, so true hyper-Bitcoinization globally, Bitcoin is for everyone scenario, we all get to do 2 transactions per lifetime if we live for 80 years. That's how much block space there is. The real question is this: do we believe in rules or do we believe in bending the knee to convenience? Because once you give into just a little inflation or just a small tax, a 1% tax, it won't stop there. It never has. You invite moral hazard. You inject political risk. Death by 1,000 forks. You lose what makes Bitcoin unique. Bitcoin is the only monetary system in human history where rules govern rulers, not the other way around. Where consensus means agreeing not to change, not endlessly tweaking to fit the moment. Ladies and gentleplebs, Bitcoin doesn't need tail emissions. It doesn't need technocratic fixes. It needs conviction. It needs users willing to defend its core truths, even when it's hard. Complacency is the only attack vector that has ever been and that will ever exist. We are not here to tinker with Bitcoin to fit today's fears. We are here to protect it so that it can outlast every empire, every manipulator, and every self-serving argument dressed up as improvement. Because once you compromise the foundation, the structure will not stand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Knut. Okay, Peter, do you want to take a few minutes to do rebuttal? We've got about 23 minutes, so if you can do maybe 5 minutes or so, and I'll give each of the gentlemen, let's say 3 or 4 minutes each. We'll do rebuttals and then go from there. Thank you.
So I always love debates like this when my opponents go bring big long speeches and scripts to go and say things, because usually it means they wind up missing the point. You know, it's very hard to go pre-prepare something to go up against an opponent. And I think what I really want to go say most of all is that Bitcoin is not as immutable as they claim it is. I mean, I personally am someone who has made changes to Bitcoin protocol. And I don't mean Bitcoin Core, I mean the actual consensus protocol that everyone who runs a node winded up choosing. And then the second thing I want to go say is we cannot look at this with emotions. We got to go look at this with technical facts. And you notice how they're so heavy on talking about tail emission. They're talking about the promises made and all this. That's all well and good, but we got to look at what actually works and what's likely to go happen in the future. And for all this saying, you know, we got to have conviction and so on. I mean, the fact is, by the definitions of a lot of people in this audience, Bitcoin miners are allowing attacks on Bitcoin. Why? Because they earn more money doing so. Do I personally think those are attacks? I'm kind of more agnostic on that. But certainly, filling up the chain with monkey JPEGs, that's something a lot of people would consider an attack. And that tells us something. We have to look at economic incentives. Now, I brought up this issue of reorgs because that is the key issue. It's certainly possible that we'll end up in a situation where there's not enough funds to go pay off to prevent 51% attackers, but that's not the main thing I'm worried about. The main thing I'm worried about is just this fundamental instability in how the incentives work for creating a new block. And the way you fix that instability is you just make sure there's always an incentive to create a new block. I don't really personally care what that incentive looks like. I know that having a subsidy is one incentive that works pretty well. I know that you can pay for that subsidy by either changing that 21 million limit, or, and this is, I think, a much more realistic option, using a soft fork with demurrage to go do this. And I want to be clear, when I say soft fork, that means something that miners can impose on you. Because remember, this is a free market. Miners can decide what fees they require to get transactions into the next block. Miners can collectively decide those fees are going to be based on the amount of coins you go spend in the time they've been in existence. And miners can decide to take that money and put it into a pool of money for all miners to go use, so they all have an incentive. This is not something that you guys just running nodes can easily stop. This is something miners can collectively decide to make mining work better. I hope if we find that this is an issue in the future, and remember, we're probably looking 10 years into the future at least, multiple halvings away, because at the moment, all of you, in terms of the in terms of the Satoshi value of your Satoshis, you're all paying about a 1% tax per year. That goes, that gets halved every halving, but eventually it becomes low enough to be insignificant. And if we don't end up in a world where you have these very, very consistent fee markets that would be necessary, obviously we should go fix this. Now, the debate topic here is fundamentally, do we think this is a potential issue? And again, I ask all of you, sit down, get a pen and paper, and start thinking, what does this actually look like if miners are trying to earn the most money? Because we already see what happens when miners try to earn the most money. They wind up in very large pools running with FPPS. They don't seem to go care about oceans, datum, and other clever things. They want to earn money. As always, money matters.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Jimmy, you're up for 3 minutes of rebuttal. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So Peter's asking, have we done the math, right? Like a good Keynesian, he's thinking, okay, you haven't done the math. I have done the math, actually. And as I pointed out in my opening speech, there is a possibility that in some hypothetical future that the rewards and reorgs, and there might be a homo economicus case to be made that some miners might want to reorg chains and so on. But as I said, there's also a social cost to doing all this. There's a reason why only Marrow Pool and F2 Pool seem to be mining transactions of op returns that are over 80 bytes. It's not because they're not more profitable. They certainly are. At least according to my analysis, they pay 2 to 3 times more fees on average than the other transactions in other blocks. The reason is there's a social cost to be paid. As soon as you're known as a spammer, this is going to continue. And besides, the current situation that we have now where you can even identify who the miners are is because of mining centralization. The pools essentially give block templates out to all the hashers and so on. We have Stratum v2, we have Datum, we have decentralized mining technology coming down the pipe. And you can right now mine and make your own templates on Datum right now if you're using Ocean Pool. And if you have that, well, then you can't just say, well, miners are going to collude, because every hasher currently is going to make their own block templates, at which point they make their own decisions. And I mean, at least a lot of the people that are mining on Ocean, like I am, I have a BitAxe at home, and it's a tiny part of the hash rate, but that's part of the whole thing. I make my own templates without all of the spam, and there are lots of people that don't do what the most profitable thing is because they don't want to hurt the network. I mean, you're essentially killing the goose that is paying you. I think that's irrational in many economic ways. So I have done the math. I don't think Peter has contributed the social costs of doing something that is clearly attacking the network, and this is why there are pools like that. And finally, miners don't control Bitcoin. He's sort of making this sort of case that I thought we debunked during the block size wars in 2017. Miners don't control Bitcoin. It's the users. I run my own node. You can't make me upgrade it or do anything that it doesn't want to. And I believe that there will be enough people like us, the people that are plebs that have a particular opinion on how things should go, that will fork off from whatever they're doing if we think it's harmful, and that's the power that we as Bitcoin users have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jimmy. And Knut, take 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah. Do you guys know which country employed the highest number of economists ever historically? It was the Soviet Union. Like, they had tons of economists employed. And I think this is what happened when you, quote unquote, do the maths here. Because economics is not about maths. It's all subjective and dynamic. It's about human incentives, as Peter says. But then he goes talking about maths. And like maths, it's not the same thing as incentives. The thing with Bitcoin is that we have unchanging rules. That is what makes us adopt it. Maths and praxeology are both a priori sciences, and the applicable one here is praxeology, not maths. A consistent fee market, he talks about a consistent fee market, that is vastly inferior to consistent rules. Like, consistent rules is the important thing here. And I would argue that is FPPS really more profitable than mining with, for instance, Ocean and using Datum? I say some very recent research says otherwise, like from what I've heard. You guys know more about this than I do, but anyway. Yeah, I would say, Jimmy talked about the golden goose. Changing Bitcoin's rules is sacrificing the golden goose for a Kinder egg, like Ethereum. And we don't want to do that. Golden geese, better than Kinder eggs. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. So we've had the rebuttal, so now we're going to have just some, back and forth. We're going to try to keep the time roughly equal, but if, Peter, if you would like to maybe ask a challenge question to this side, and after that, we'll get the same way, the other way.
Yeah, I mean, you keep on talking about the rules being consistent, but I guess the question for you is, how many different soft forks do you know of?
I know of at least 5. Yeah, and obviously your object lock time verify is the one that you were referring to. Peter authored that. So.
And what are those? What is a soft fork?
I mean, I think we all know what a soft fork is.
But is it a change of rules or not?
Yeah, I mean, it is. But it's a change of rules that is consistent with every other rule that's been on Bitcoin?
Well, it's a change of rules that is a tightening of the rules. And let's be clear, adding something like demurrage is a soft fork.
Well, so demurrage is also theft. So why would you want to do that? I mean,
Well,
all right. So here's my question for you:
Well,
is demurrage or inflation theft in your opinion, or is it justified?
I would say it depends on what you're doing with it and why. Right now, we do have quote-unquote theft of 1% per year that goes to miners. That's how Bitcoin works.
That's not theft because it's 21 million, and everyone knows that it's 21 million. Whenever it's unexpected, and you increase that number, demurrage is straight up theft, right? It's literally taking, you have something like 10 Bitcoin in your wallet and you haven't spent it in however long, or they take like, 0.1%, a basis point away or something like that.
Let's be clear on how this would actually work. You would do a soft fork where miners agree that when you go to spend your money, they're going to ask for a fee high enough to go cover that demurrage tax. Now, right now, they can always ask for a fee. That's just reality. Right now, a fee is a fee. They can go choose to require a fee of at least that much. Now, you can go call that theft. I mean, I honestly don't care what you call it. Bitcoiners love to say taxation is theft. But the critical question is, can miners go do this? And the answer is yes, and your node is not going to stop them.
No, I mean, they can try to do it, but there are going to be other miners. Like this notion that miners are like some central entity that you can, that's only true right now because of the whole pooling system. And we are going towards a world where we're going to have decentralized mining with Stratum V2, with Datum and protocols like that, where individual hashers get to decide on the template, not pools.
Well,
and that coordination is not something that you can just assume.
Let's just be clear here. Even with something like Datum, you can absolutely create a pool, because remember, Datum always works through pools. You absolutely can create a pool that says, hey, my offer to you is, if you go mine here, we are going to get this policy implemented in Bitcoin.
What policy are you talking about?
Well, any policy you wish to go and say.
No,
again, they're going to face the social cost.
Let's rewind here. You said, Jimmy asked you whether you think demurrage is theft or not, and you said it depends on what you use it for.
Yes.
So please explain that. When is it not theft? That sounds suspiciously much like a central banker to me, or like a politician.
Look, I know a lot of Bitcoiners like to say taxation is theft. I fundamentally disagree with that. Taxation is not always theft.
Okay, then what is it?
It depends on what, like if you are taxing to go and do something that's not in the public good, that becomes theft. I mean, this is why the U.S. revolution, of course, famously taxation without representation. Now, if you're going and taxing something to go make sure that we can actually go pay for the security we all need, I will not call that theft. I would call that you are paying into the system you need. Obviously, all of Bitcoin.
And how do you define public good? So who makes that decision that it is a public good or not?
All Bitcoiners need the process of block finding to happen consistently and without disruption. I don't think that should be a very controversial statement. We all need...
Well, that doesn't happen right now. You can have like 3 hours of no blocks and about once a year just because of the...
When I said consistent without disruption, I mean, obviously there's certain probabilistic elements to how blocks are found. But when someone finds a block, say 3 hours after the other one, that's fine for things like Lightning, for things like savings and so on. What matters is people doing reorgs. That's the type of thing that becomes disruptive, and it's also the type of thing...
That's speculation. We don't have reorg attacks. We don't know the conditions under which they'll happen. Your speculation is that they will happen as soon as it's a little bit more profitable for the miner, and I don't think that's true. There's a social cost to be paid, and I don't think your math is correct.
Let's go back to the social cost thing. You made the argument that the social cost was disproved by showing that only 2 pools were mining oversized op returns. But that's not the argument Luke Jr. makes. He makes the argument that the vast majority of pools...
Why are you bringing up Luke Jr.?
Hang on.
I didn't make that argument.
He makes the argument that the vast majority of pools are attacking Bitcoin by mining monkey JPEGs and taproot witnesses. Now, I think you bring up the op return argument is just wrong, because op return is a very niche feature that no one expects to be used very often. The real argument you should make is mining large amounts of inscription an attack?
Okay, your attacking Luke in a debate with us
About
right?
something
about
else.
something completely different. it just seems completely out of left
but
field.
let's be
And
clear.
you're attacking, this is the definition of a straw man. You want to attack Luke instead of attacking what we're saying.
But let's be clear. You made an argument that is about a feature in Bitcoin that's not relevant.
I made the argument that miners recognize that there's a social cost to be paid, and you're denying that there is a social cost.
Because the social costs that you should actually be talking about is the social cost of things like
I'm
inscriptions.
sorry, I'm not making the argument that you want me to make so that you can attack me back.
No,
but
I'm helping strawman your argument because
no, you're not.
is a niche feature.
No, you're making an argument that you want me to make so that you can attack
Well,
it.
look,
I just think
hang on,
that's a dishonest.
Once version 30 is released, we can have this exact same discussion right here in 1 year, and more likely than not, the majority of hashing power will be mining oversized op returns. Now, would you still say that's an attack?
I mean, once it's the default on some of these, then yeah, of course they might or might not run it. But I wouldn't say that it'll be consistently every block will have oversized op returns.
Wait, so it suddenly becomes non-attack just because Bitcoin Core?
No, I didn't say that it's not an attack. It's just that it becomes the default.
This is not black and white, right? You agree.
And you're bringing up a completely different argument. I find this with certain types of debaters, where they don't want to answer the question that we give them. Is it theft or not? And he says, it depends. It might, and there's this public good thing and the governance.
Hang on,
you haven't answered any of those questions about what is governance, what's good, who decides, and all of that. It's just, I just want to make it, I just want to decide on all of these things, and whatever I say is true.
Let me very directly answer your question. For demurrage, for something between, say, 0.1% to 1%, I would say it is not theft. It is a contribution to security for everyone. That is taxation, and then taxation is not always theft.
Well, that's just your opinion, man. So I think this is not black and white. Like, we when we run our nodes, we do so, and we accept stuff in the Bitcoin blockchain that we don't like. But there's like a threshold where it becomes unacceptable, and then you just stop running that software. Like, this is the thing. Like, if you introduce something like demurrage or a tax, people would just not run that software because it's to them it's theft.
Well, so I think what Peter is saying is that the miners control Bitcoin. I thought we debunked this back in 2017, but he's bringing that argument back. I really don't think that's
because it is not as simple as do miners control Bitcoin or not. There are things where miners have more influence than others. Hard forks versus soft forks is a very difficult technical question. And getting back to you not writing the software, I mean, one way I could go answer that is, well, you're basically saying that if miners collectively decide, and this is a majority of hash power, is the minimum to do this, that they want to have demurrage to make sure that mining happens. Hang on. They want to say mining happens in an orderly way. Seems like one answer is you could just say, well, screw that, I'm going to use something other than Bitcoin.
Yes, and that's what happened in 2017. Some miners said Bitcoin Cash is the real deal.
But that's not what happened.
And then
that was a hard fork, not a soft fork.
Okay.
Well, I mean, basically what Peter is saying, that the miners have influence in the sense that they get to tell you what the rules are going to be. And I fundamentally disagree even on a soft fork. Yeah. And I think the users control, it is you that runs the node, and it is you that gets to decide what's on your node and whether or not you or take or reject blocks. The miners work for us, not the other way around.
Whether you want to relay spam or not is part of that.
Okay, so gentlemen, that's been some great back and forth. We've only got 4 minutes left, so let's do 1 minute each closing statements, and then I'll take the final vote. So, Peter, would you like to take a minute at the stand, give your what is your final pitch?
Well, I think at this point, the fact of the matter is, this debate is really entertainment for audiences. Like I said before, our current, taxation rates to go pay for mining security is like 1%. And, another, I don't know, was it 3 years or something, drops in half again, and so on. But in the long run, these questions are things that become more and more important. And it's good that we're willing to have these kinds of debates and willing to go and help the whole community understand what kind of trade-offs there might be. But when you get down to it, I always ask you, stop listening to people who just want to go hand wave. Even Austrian economists are willing to do math. And you can model human incentives with math because human incentives in economics have money attached. I like math. It's good for you.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Jimmy, would you like to take the stand for 1 minute closing statement?
Yeah, I agree with Peter. I love that we have these debates and we are thinking about long-term things because a lot of shitcoiners kind of, hand wave over a lot of the problems that they have. We're actually thinking about them and actually debating them. And I agree that it is sort of like a little bit of theater because there's no way this change is going to happen in a million years. There are just too many people that see 21 million as sacred. But it is good to think about what the incentives are and do the math, especially about the social costs, which I think are very difficult to figure out. But miner behavior, pool behavior, individual behavior, that's what ultimately decides these things. And the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that you, as a user, get to run your own node and decide what Bitcoin is for you, and that ultimately decides the economic majority, and that's what Bitcoin ends up being. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jimmy. Knut?
Yeah, I once saw Peter use a graphic in another similar debate to explain lost coins, and it's a leaky water bucket, and you fill it with water. These are the new coins, and then the bucket leaks the lost coins. Is that a correct representation of it?
Yes.
Yeah. I would say the bucket is not leaking. That's the whole point of the fucking bucket. It's 21 million. It does not leak. The lost coins are in the bucket. The thing that makes the bucket leak is opening a valve and adding more coins. Like that's, pouring more water into it so water runs over. Anyway, you get where I'm getting at. Like that is the leakage, not the lost, so quote-unquote lost coins. So I would not like to sacrifice my golden goose for a Kinder Egg. And you can do the math if you want to, or you can do the Macarena. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you, gentlemen, for a very vigorous debate. Now it's time for you, the audience, to give us your perspective. So we're going to do a quick show of hands. Who of you sided more with Peter and you believe in Peter's view that there's a significant issue here? Yeah, it's probably about what do you think?
10%?
10%?
4.5.
That's probably where
Did it go up or down?
Yeah.
6.5.
So it went up.
I think it's, I believe it actually has gone up a little bit. Let's also count now. Who of you side with Jimmy and Knut on this issue? Hands up.
Come on.
That honestly, it's pretty close to call. I don't know if I can call this. I honestly think it's pretty much, basically, I think very few people have changed their minds on this. I hate to do this, but I genuinely, I think I can't call a winner on this one. So I'm going to have to call this one a tie. But that's it from us. Thank you, everyone. Please put your hands together for our debaters, Knut, Jimmy, and Peter. Thank you.
All right.
Secure your BTC Prague 2026 ticket at the lowest possible price now.